guys, welcome back to According To. I'm Megan.
And I'm Ciera. For this week's episode, Megan and I thought it would be fun to talk about kind of our job hunting, post-graduation timeline, experience, potential tips and tricks if we have any.
Yeah, so we will jump into that in a moment. We always like to do kind of quick catch-ups just with what's been going on in our life the past week since we last recorded. So sometimes we'll do book catch-ups, sometimes we'll do our weekly spotlights. Well, we always do our weekly spotlights, but
a little
just
bit of
honestly
everything.
Whatever comes to mind. So weekly spotlight. You have anything that comes to mind?
Mine, semi-related to the topic of this episode, is that I worked for a full 5 days last week.
How'd that feel?
It was fine, actually.
Good. My jealousy hasn't been like as bad as I was expecting it to be, with like me having to like work, and then Ciera would be just like doing whatever for the first 2 weeks that I was working.
Yeah.
Mostly because I feel like I had just been doing that with you, and I was like, I'm literally doing nothing all day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I think I've had my fix of doing nothing all day. And, sometimes it's fun to sit and read my day away, because I got so much reading done.
Something that we could talk about, though, if we wanted to, like, get into it, is, like, when people are full-time influencers and, like, not to say that they don't do anything. Like, I'm sure we were doing less than what a lot of them do. But I feel like, in the back of your mind at some point, have you ever been like, oh, like, if I was a full-time influencer, like, what would I be doing?
I'd certainly have to be, like, doing more than what we were doing.
Yeah.
Because we were not doing a whole lot at all.
I agree.
But I guess my weekly spotlight, I'll say, was on Friday. I got done pretty early at, like, I don't know, it was, like, just before 3 o'clock. But I was happy with that. So,
good stuff.
Do
you have a book catch up?
Yeah, so I just finished a book. I finished
Before We Were Strangers.
I keep wanting to
Megan
say...
drives me crazy with not remembering the name of anything ever.
I kept wanting to say When We Were Strangers, and that's not the name. And I really liked it. It was a romance where the beginning of the book is like present time, and it kind of sets the scene, and then the characters end up like seeing each other, but like they don't have like, they can't, like, she's like going away on a train, she just like turns around, like they see each other again. They haven't seen each other in like 15 years. So then it jumps back, and the first part of the book is kind of like when they met in college and like going through their whole relationship then. And then the second part of the book is like it jumps back to present time and them reconnecting. And I really liked it. I think I finished it in 2 or 3 days, and I rated it 4 stars, but it was good. So I think that's my only new one.
I don't know if I have a ton to catch you guys up on, because I think the book that I'm reading now is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. And I don't know if I caught you guys up on the last book that I read before that. If I can check my Goodreads quick. Hold on. I've been kind of slow lately. Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, and then I read One of Us is Lying.
Oh, I guess I read Tomorrow.
Megan had some, not hot takes, but...
I was a little underwhelmed / disappointed with the book, just because I felt like it had such high expectations going into it. Like, everyone was rating it like 5 stars, I feel like. And so I still gave it 4 stars because I respected what the author did, and there weren't things about it that like annoyed me per se. I just didn't necessarily like find it super intriguing, and like I was just like wanting to finish the book until like the very end, especially like the very last couple chapters I thought were like extremely long and unnecessary. And Ciera had a different experience than I did, because I think I kind of maybe figured out what was already going on a little bit. So I was like, why is this chapter 40 pages long? Just cut to the chase. And so yeah, I still gave it 4 stars. So it is a good book. Yeah.
You stepped out, like, not to say you don't ever step outside of the realm of romance, but I feel like you read a lot more like romance. Like, it takes up a larger percentage of what you read.
It's so quick to get through that it makes me feel really accomplished, because like my reading just like stays really consistent. And yeah, so
like, if we were, unfortunately Goodreads doesn't have this feature, and I know Storygraph does, but I don't want to get started with another book app. But it'd be interesting to see, like, between the two of us, our breakdown and percentages for the different genres of books.
What if you just go to the books you've read this year and count how many? Because we both read, like, you've read 20 books, I read 19. So, like, it's pretty similar. So if I count how many of my books that I've read so far this year are romance.
While you're doing that, because I feel like we can't both do it at the same time while we're in the middle of podcasting. So I think I'm just going to cover the last, 2 books that I read, and then I'm reading.
Are you counting The Lost Ticket as a romance?
I don't know. Maybe.
12 or 13 is what I did out of my 19.
Okay.
But that's 7 that weren't.
Let me look at mine. So counting the ones that are romance.
Yeah. I had some mystery in there. I had some sci-fi. I had general fiction. Read fast or
6 or 7.
Faster. Okay, so you've read more not than romance.
Okay, so one of us is lying. I gave 4 stars, and then Today, Tonight, Tomorrow I gave 4 stars. That one's a romance. That one's like a YA romance, and I think I'm realizing, because I feel like I've read 3 YA romances this year, and I'm like, maybe I just am not like a YA romance stan. I think I gave all of them 4 stars, but the high school backdrop, I'm just like, it means nothing to me anymore. And I feel like this is a common thing in YA books because they're targeted for mostly children in high school, young adults, teenagers in high school.
Young adult romance is targeted for young adults.
Yeah. But with the high school backdrop, 1, they kind of all start to feel the same. And then 2, they're focused on just the high school cliches of, who's popular, the who's who, the different cliques and all this stuff. And I'm so far removed from that I just don't really care or relate to that stuff anymore. And so it makes it harder to get through in that sense. So
we also finally had Maggie finish reading Project Hail Mary.
Oh yeah.
We had been
hounding her,
screaming at her to finish reading that book because she owned a copy of it for such a long time but just never got around to reading it. And then finally when football season finished up, she was like, okay, I'm finally going to give it a go. And she rated it 4.75, which, it wasn't a 5-star, which is what every single other person that we've got to read it has rated it. But I was still pretty pleased with that. She said it was a great book. She loved the characters just like we did, but it is at some points a pretty science-heavy book. So it kind of lost her a little bit there.
I still think for the most part it is approachable science where it's complicated, but I think the author does a good job of breaking it down. I feel like The Martian was more science complicated where I kind of skimmed through stuff. I'll
trust you, and I'm
okay, I trust that works. I'm skipping to over here.
Mm-hmm. And then now I had to bring it up because I was on Goodreads, and I am now friends with Sam on Goodreads, and so she sent the book back with him after he visited Maggie in Cincinnati, and he updated it this morning. He was on page 217.
Nice.
I'm just
I'm actually impressed with how much he's reading because I know he's not a big reader, same as Maggie's boyfriend if you don't know. But he doesn't regularly read.
We were we've convinced everyone around us to read this book. And same if you're listening, we have gotten people who have reached out or DM'd us saying that they have picked up the book and are reading it because we suggested it, and that everyone has said that they've loved it. Okay, so I'm just saying,
trust our judgment.
Trust our judgment. Trust the million other people that read it on Goodreads. It's a great book.
Okay. Anything this week that's happened that you want to catch people up on? We are prepping to do our According to photo shoot hopefully at some point this weekend. We have not everything we need, but pretty much everything we need. So yeah, we're excited. I'm hoping.
Excited. I'm hopeful. It'll be interesting to see how it turns out with just the 2 of us running the show.
Yeah.
But
we're gonna try our best.
I think otherwise, the women's basketball team made it to the Elite 8. We watched that game yesterday.
Every other Iowa team that was in March Madness is out except for the Iowa women's basketball team.
And so they play again on Sunday. So this will already have, passed and by the time this is over with. But I'm really rooting for them. I have them winning it all just because I had them going so far. I was like, I might as well.
Yeah, I do too.
Have them go all the way.
Realistically, they could go, far. So then at that point, I was like, we might as well just send it and go for the championship. So that's what I have them at as well.
Otherwise, men's tournament stuff, my bracket has been horrible, but the fact that all of the number 1 seeds are out.
I had Houston winning and all. They just lost yesterday as we're recording this.
And you weren't even watching the game.
No, I knew it was going on though, but then the women's team was playing and I cared more about that. I just wanted to kind of keep tabs on Houston and then I forgot until it was after it was over. And I was like, I'm looking it up and I hope that they lost.
So, yeah. That's kind of it. I'm not going to go into like a whole basketball segment. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, to recap, for those of you unfamiliar, I feel like most of you probably do remember, but we graduated in December from the University of Iowa with our DPT, and that qualified us to be able to take the state licensure exam for physical therapy. And they have different exams at different points in the year. Is there like three times that they have it a year? So it has to be like a set date. So you can most people take it after they graduate. Some people can take it before they graduate.
Yeah, so you technically, if you get approval from your school, you could take it, I think, like 90 days before you graduate. Our school really didn't encourage anyone to do that because there was an option, like, in theory, that meant some people in our class could have taken it in October. I don't think anyone did. Our program basically straight up said, like, please don't, just, like, wait and take it in January so you have, like, just a dedicated month where you can study. And then a lot of people that graduate in May, which is like if you're in a program that's 3 years, which is what most of them are, then most people do graduate in May. I think a fair number of people will take it in April before they graduate. I personally think that'd be a lot of...
Especially since, this is what I don't get about how other programs are set up. It seems like they're like during clinical rotations, before graduation, like that's when the exam hits. And I'm like, that would be so stressful. Like, I loved that we graduated, we were all done, no clinical rotations, and we still had a month to have, like, dedicated studying time for it. I can't imagine trying to balance clinical, studying on top of that, and then, like, prepping for graduation.
It'd be a lot. Otherwise, if people graduate in May, I think that they otherwise take it in July, I'm pretty sure.
I don't really know.
I didn't have to worry about it because that's not when I was graduating, but if I were to, like, suggest one option over the other, I would say wait and take it after you graduate just because then you're not too overwhelmed. But some people really want to like just get it done, and when they graduate, like they want to have a job and start making money. But I'm kind of like, at the end of the day,
you want
a
to pass
month or two at the most after, like, is it really gonna make that much of a difference? And I just also think like you have been in school so long, don't you just want a
little bit of a break?
A little bit. Do some traveling, do like a couple other things before you're just like in the working world.
Anyway, so then we took our boards, and then after that is when we started job hunting. And I will say, like, our timeline probably is way skewed from what other people in our class even did. I think it's definitely different than like what I thought I was going to end up doing before, like, what actually happened. And so I think that, you know, if you asked me like a year ago what my plan was for like my job hunting timeline, I probably would have said like, oh, I hope that I have a job like by the end of the year, being the end of 2022, like lined up and stuff. And that didn't happen. I think in part because obviously like a lot of job interviews and stuff have some sort of in-person component. And with our grandpa passing away and like all of the time, energy, whatever dedicated to that, and like having to take days off to like
we didn't have options.
Like I know other people in our class I think got like up to 3 days or something off to take if they were doing job interviews or something. I'd taken 6 days. I had to make up 3, and I just didn't want to take any more time off. Not to mention I had to like again make up the days that I had missed some of them. So I was like, and I was in Cedar Rapids. I didn't want a job in Cedar Rapids. I was like, there's no way I can even think about doing an in-person interview. And like I'm working during the day. I can't do like a phone interview during regular work hours. So then I was like, okay, I'm definitely not getting a job before graduation. It's kind of like what I ended up settling on by the end of the year, which wasn't my plan, but I was like, it's fine. Then I thought, did you have like anything, like, did you think you were going to do job hunting before graduation or?
I kind of think that I didn't have a whole like preconceived idea. I think I thought that I would do a good, like, I think I thought I would start when I finished graduating, and then I was like prepping for the MPT, and I was going to use that month to really focus on studying and also job searching. So
okay, so then we get to January. We're doing our studying. Not to say I wasn't like looking at jobs here and there, because I was, but I definitely like wasn't actively doing anything. Keep in mind we had a trip to Hawaii planned for end of January, right after we finished boards, and then beginning of February. And so it eventually like got so close to boards that I was like, if I start applying and stuff, they're going to be reaching out to me when I'm on vacation and stuff, and I don't want to have to deal with like
I also
time
kind
zone
of got
differences
to a point where like when we were getting so close to boards, obviously any job offer you get is contingent on you passing boards, And I was getting to a point where I was like, maybe I just like wait until I like have officially passed boards. Like the longer I pushed it off, the more I was like, even more reason to just like actually push it off and not feel bad about it. And to be honest, like there were a couple jobs that were posted that I was like maybe interested in or bookmarking, but I felt okay just continuing to wait to see what else would pop up.
And I think all of this to say, like, there is no right or wrong timeline. I feel like the longer you push something off, you kind of like get this like internal guilt of like, oh, like I know so many other people have their job lined up. Like, should I have a job lined up? Like, there is no like, should you do whatever?
There were some people in our class who had their jobs lined up like over the summer, like a couple months after we had like left the classroom. And so it's like 8 months out and they've got their job lined up. There were probably I would say at least half the class did have a job lined up when we had went back to do graduation. But there was also still kind of more than I was expecting who like hadn't really,
decided what they were doing.
Job hunting process. So I didn't feel like completely alone when we went back.
Yeah. So,
and some people were like going to move somewhere else. And so it was like they had like all of that to figure out too. And they were maybe like waiting until they were actually there in person to kind of dive into the job hunt.
But I just wanted to emphasize that there is no right or wrong timeline. Obviously, we're talking about something very specific to us being in the PT field. But I think there's even that pressure when people graduate college to have a job lined up by the time you graduate. And a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And so then people are like, I feel like a failure that I graduated college and I don't have a job. And it's like, you're on your own timeline. Like, obviously try and just take care of yourself. You want to, a job is necessary for most people to make money and live life. But give yourself some grace to take that time if you need it and are able to.
Okay. What resources did we use when we were job hunting? Honestly, we'd used a lot of like the very basic things that probably everyone uses. I used Indeed a lot. I used LinkedIn. I was probably checking most things like on a daily basis. And then I ended up just like signing up for like the daily email notifications so like I would know if something new came up because I was getting tired of just like going to the websites and searching every day. So a little bit of that. We also, our program, if they had people reaching out to them who had jobs opening and they wanted to let former alumni or recent graduates know, we would get emails for that. None of them, like I didn't really consider a lot of them because a lot of them would be like
out of the state or something,
somewhere completely different that I was like not gonna do. But helpful.
Kept your eye open. Yeah, I used a lot of the same resources. I mean, I definitely would also just like Google stuff, and then that kind of like it compiles listings from multiple different websites. The annoying thing for that is sometimes it's the same job that's like posted across different websites, and so you think there's more out there than there is.
Or another thing you can do is if you have a specific company that you're looking for, go to their specific website that they have their careers posted on and try to see what's on there, because some of them will do that rather than posting on something like Indeed or Glassdoor or whatever.
And that's how I found all of the places that I ended up applying to. I applied everywhere online.
Yeah. I didn't call or reach out to anyone on my own, but I have heard of like one of the PTs at my last rotation told me that he had like wanted to work at a specific place, and he just like emailed or called them and like let it be known that he was really interested in working there. And they said they didn't have a position available, but then like 2 weeks later they called him saying like, actually we're thinking of hiring someone. So like,
as long as it's done in a professional manner and like you just put your name out there, there's no like they're not gonna dock you for that. If anything, I think the initiative and interest like highlights how much you want to work there.
Yeah. Next, we can talk about resumes a little bit, because
resumes are a hot topic, and honestly, it still amazes me how poorly some people still like create resumes. And I'm not even trying to say my resume is like the hottest resume to ever hit the shelves, but some people's resumes are just very surprising to look at. And so I know there's like a bunch of people talking about like, oh, should your resume like have your picture on it? Should it have like colorful stuff and whatever?
I think it definitely depends on the field you're going into.
I have only ever heard people say like graphic design is where you should have a resume that
looks a little nicer.
Is not really like nicer, but like has design elements. Every other, I cannot think of a single other job where you need to have a resume that looks like that. And I've also heard, I've seen one comment on one TikTok, but someone was showing their resume and it had a picture of them, and someone said that when they get resumes with pictures of the person on it, they have to throw those out because it's like a DEI thing where it's like they're not supposed to like judge people based on how they look. So I've never really seen a ton of resumes with pictures on it, but just a warning.
So what was nice was that when our last semester that we had classes, we had a like business management admin class that we worked on creating our resumes so that when we were applying for jobs, we hopefully wouldn't have to like start from scratch, which I have to say was very nice because I did actually redo the format of mine a little bit because I wanted to change a few things up, but it was nice that I had basically like all the content there. And editing resumes is one of my least favorite things, like because actual format wise, I must not be very smart on like Word because like there has to be an easier way to do all that stuff.
Space barring until your dates are on the right side of the sheet.
Here's what I did as a new grad, just like generally speaking, because obviously we're going into a position where like this is our first job as a physical therapist. And so what we did and what most people I think do is like they talk about like their previous clinical experiences and go into that. You could include former employment if you want. I actually didn't on mine, but I had my former clinical stuff, my research experiences, and then also like some related volunteer stuff that I did in grad school. And it seemed fine.
Also, like schooling should be on the top.
Yeah.
So we had both our undergrad and DPT degree on there. Your highest level of education should be at the very top. Otherwise, just like small little things that I think everyone should like pay attention to when they're doing their resume. One, make sure that like it's consistent all the way down, whether that's fonts, whether that's spacing between bullet points. Always like make sure that you're using the same tense when you're saying what you did at your job. Most of the time you should be using past tense because you did this at your job. And so don't have something being like weighted tables, blah, 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 and then said like, I would cook for something. I don't know. I'm trying to think of 2 different tenses for a sentence, and I don't even know what job I'm thinking of right now. But just keep it all the same tense.
And then there was one job that I applied to that I needed references, and so I reached out to 2 of my CIs that I had, and then also our former gymnastics coach. I don't even know if they ended up calling them, but
always make sure you contact your references that you are using, because they're gonna be really confused if they get a call from someone being like, oh, like so and so write you down as a reference, and even if they would be like happy to do it, they might just be like a little caught off guard.
Yeah, definitely reach out first. So yeah, they're aware that you did that, and that if someone does call, they're not confused.
Or like it even just gives them time to like think of something, like if they haven't seen you in a while, like to think of something like, oh, like I remember that, you know, so and so did this when we worked together, and like I can bring that up. But like if they're getting a cold call from someone like asking for reference, they're like, let me think 1 second, like I don't really remember. So yeah. Getting into, is it time for like the phone interview process? Is that
I had it kind of first. We could talk about what we were looking for in different positions, and you know what things that we'd be like, okay, I'll save this position for later, I'll maybe apply to it. So I have like different things. One was salary, which is kind of hard because like you don't always know how accurate the salary that they're posting or claiming for a job is going to actually be appropriate.
Especially if it's a lot of websites will do estimators of like based off of similar postings. Don't trust that. Like first of all, it's such a wide range usually, and then it's not coming from the actual company itself, so you don't know if that's even close to accurate.
I'm not going to get into like what either of us are getting paid, but I was kind of looking for a position that was going to be paid hourly, and when we were in school, that was something that one of our professors had said, like if you can get paid hourly, she would suggest doing that. And then I was looking at specific settings too, so you know, I was kind of leaning more towards inpatient just because I liked the more flexible hours and scheduling, and just like I feel like you have a little bit more control over how your day-to-day goes. So there were a lot of, you know, outpatient positions, and I was like, you know, staying open to them, but I was really trying to hone in on inpatient stuff. I knew I was not going to work at like an athletic or like ATI. No offense to those companies, but it's just like the productivity for those companies is kind of insane, and there are good outpatient places to work.
That's the other thing I was gonna say. This is like definitely specific for like PT or
Right.
you know, something that has like a productivity standard where you're working with like clients and patients and stuff. But a lot of outpatient clinics, like I would, if you're looking at jobs, I would ask what their productivity expectations are, because some of them are so crazy high.
Like you're literally overlapping patients. I would never, ever, ever work somewhere where you were overlapping patients.
I don't know, one patient is enough for my brain right now. I can't do like 2 or 3 patients at one time. It's not possible. And some would argue unethical, but you know.
I was also kind of looking at more like specialty outpatient settings. So there are some places around the Des Moines area that are like maybe like more balance specific or, you know, things like that. Those were things that I was looking, you know, keeping my eye on if anything was going to get posted, but like they're not everywhere. So like I didn't really see anything, but like if I had, I think I would have been open to something like that as well.
I also feel like I should note, like, my job searching process might not necessarily even be done, because I'm kind of finishing up my PRN orientation stuff right now, and I may have to get another job. I don't know what hours that would require, whether it's full-time, part-time, another PRN, but that's still something that I'm trying to figure out right now. So I'm not acting like I have my life all figured out right now.
Mm-hmm. Another thing was kind of feeling out the vibe of the company, the team you'd be working with. I actually didn't have any in-person interviews, which I was expecting to. But I felt like when I was on the phone with the position that I ended up taking, / like I had already looked at their website and like their company values and stuff, I felt like they fit pretty well with, you know, what I think is important. And having now actually worked there for like 3 weeks, I do think that I meshed well with the team.
She knows everything now.
I know everything now, 3 weeks in. But like there was a couple phone interviews where like I just kind of didn't get a vibe where I was like, I could see myself working here. And so as best you can, you just kind of want to trust your gut a little bit and not necessarily jump on something because it's going well and they're continuing to like move you
like,
further along.
If you feel like, oh, this is good because they still want me, you have to still ask yourself, like, do you still want them? Do you still want to work there?
Like, to be honest, I think almost any of the positions I was applying for, I probably could have gone all the way, just because like if they're like not having anyone apply for the position and I'm the only one there, they're probably going to take me unless they have like some huge major red flag. I just got the impression like they weren't, the postings had been up for a while, so I didn't know how much traction or applications they were getting. So I kind of had to take a step back and say, do I want to continue pursuing this position or not? And so, yeah. Next thing was like the hours that they were going to have for working. There was one position that I was applying to that was acute care, and I ended up finding out it was going to be like a Tuesday to Saturday. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So that was kind of like an immediate out. A lot of outpatient clinics too.
Yeah,
like,
I was looking at some outpatient stuff.
Like,
I had even like not really started the interview process, but I had like sent an application and like was kind of an email correspondence with someone, and they were like, hey, just, you know, like for this clinic, we kind of expect like you to alternate your hours between like working until 6 p.m. a couple days and like have occasional Saturdays. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah. What I learned was, because one of my clinical rotations, I had variable scheduling, just like my hours depended on like the day of the week. So some days it was like 6 to 3, and then other days it was like 9 to 6. And what I realized is like more than just like one extreme over the other, I hated the alternating hours, because like then I didn't know what was going on entirely. The days where I got done at 6 p.m. and I had to be there at 6 a.m. the next morning, like actually like hurt my soul a little bit. And so I was just like, I'm not doing that. I can't be doing that. So
try and be realistic with yourself. I feel like sometimes it's easy to have like rose-colored glasses when you're like, this job is perfect, you know, here, 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 and here. But I'm just gonna ignore like this one thing over here. Like if you don't think you can do it long term,
it's great being off at 3, but like I also know myself, and I'm not really a morning person. So getting up at 5, not great for me. And then also like getting up at 5 to like go work out is one thing. Getting up at 5 to be at work at 6, and then also like if you have to work out later that day, I don't know. I realized I was kind of like, you know, it makes me feel more productive if I am going to work out. I could get it done in the morning. So that means I have to start work a little later, even if I am then getting off not at 3. But hours were a big thing that I was like, what exactly am I agreeing to? And then this was like a bonus that I kind of thought of when I was thinking of stuff. I guess adding to that was like flexible hours, or the ability to, at least with depending on the inpatient schedule, like I know acute care, you have your certain patients that you're seeing that day, and you don't necessarily have like a set amount of time you're working with them. And then same with the setting that I'm in. So it's kind of like once you get your patient list done for the day, you're out of there. And I like that. And inpatient rehab is different. They have to have usually like a set amount of time with patients.
Yeah, they have set schedules.
So that was something that I liked. And then also just like dress code. I personally like wearing scrubs or just like things that are comfy. Business casual isn't really my favorite. So like that's just like another small thing.
Yeah,
But
like was that the end all
no.
be all of Megan's job hunting process or mine? No, but you know it is a plus.
Yeah. So those were kind of the different things that we were looking for. Anything that you can think of that was like, if you saw that you were like absolutely not going to apply to a position, or
Well, this is like kind of unrelated, but like there's a lot of travel contracts out right now. It's hard to like weed those out.
And then I'd be like, well, I'm not looking for a travel contract.
I have seen, this is like kind of unrelated to the conversation, but I've seen like a lot of travel nurses, mostly on TikTok, where they'll take travel contracts within the area they live.
Yeah.
But then it's kind of weird because you have to change travel companies a lot, and I feel like that's frowned upon. But because travel people usually get paid more, and so like they would be essentially like working full time locally, so they don't have to worry about travel and stipends and stuff. Which I didn't know then if they got paid the stipend and stuff that they usually get for travel.
I don't know. That's confused me, honestly. But I've seen stuff about that.
Yeah. I've heard people say like logistically and like with taxes and stuff, it's a slippery slope. So I don't know.
Okay. Next, I figured we could jump into kind of like each of the listings and kind of like when we pursued them, what that interview job process was like. And then, yeah.
I believe that throughout my process so far, I applied to 4 places, if that sounds right. 2 of them stopped after, well, one like was an outpatient clinic, the one I talked about with the hours, and that like stopped with like email correspondence. Like I never did an official interview or anything because I was like, yeah, I don't think that this is gonna work out because the hours were something that I didn't want to commit to. Another one was another PRN position. I was applying to like a couple different PRN positions, and so the one that I got hired at like had reached out to me, and like I was pretty much already hired at that point by the time the second PRN company even like reached back out to me after my initial application that I sent in. And it was also they had an inpatient and an outpatient clinic, and I had applied for the inpatient one. They reached back out to me for like the outpatient one, and then I was just like, I just don't know, like right now with like all the PRN stuff going on, like I kind of wanted to pause on that. And so I think they called me, and I just like didn't call them back because they were like, if you want to like learn more about the outpatient one, like call us back or something. So I didn't. And then the other one that I applied to was, it was for a sniff. This one was kind of weird because I like had gone through some interview stuff, and then like I went for a facility tour, and then I just never heard anything again.
I was gonna be like, did they just like ghost you after that?
Yeah. Which then like part of me was like, should I reach back out to them? Because I know a lot of people do. But then like I also hadn't decided at that point if I like wanted to actually work there. So I was like, it'd be weird if I reached out and they're like, oh yeah, do you want the job? And I'd be like, no. Yeah. You know? So I was like just kind of waiting to see if they'd reach back out, and they just never did.
So the first one I think that I applied to was probably like the acute care one, or like I didn't necessarily actually apply. I was like getting more information. That's some of these postings on the job websites are so vague that I'm like reaching out because I maybe want to apply, but I don't even fully know what I'm applying for.
It's so annoying. And you don't know where you're, when it's, especially if it's a like website or company that like posts listing for other companies, and they're like, work for this amazing like, you know, locally Des Moines
Why don't you
hospital,
say the name?
And it's like, where am I applying to? Where am I going to work? That's what I want to know. It's so annoying.
And then as soon as I found out the schedule was Tuesday to Saturday, I was like, count me out. Sorry. Then I also applied to, this was one of those like, the listing was so vague, but it was like one of the only other acute care inpatient positions I was seeing. And so I applied to it to try and get more information. And then this was listed through a recruiting company, which some of them do that. So it wasn't actually like with the company. So I got called, kind of like I did like 2 phone screens.
Megan went
through
like the rabbit hole with this one.
Yeah. I did 2 like 10-15 minute phone screens with 2 different people at this recruiting company. So I wasn't even talking to like who would be hiring me at the end of the day. And the phone screens were like the exact same, completely pointless. It basically was like they would give me some information, but like they didn't work for the company or know much else except for like the location and the setting. And so they'd be like, I don't know much else. It was just really hard to like get information. So I kind of like agreed to continue going through the process to be like, okay, like
what am I applying to?
More, I guess. So after doing 2 phone screens, I got set up with like an actual phone interview with someone who actually worked there. I found out that it was combined inpatient and home health, which I didn't know. And I didn't really want to do home health. So at that point, I was kind of like, okay, I don't really know if I want to do that. And then it was also interesting because keep in mind, this was posted through a recruiting company's page. That's how I found the job. It wasn't posted anywhere else on like Indeed, just like by the company itself. Okay. Otherwise I wouldn't have known about this job. And so when I was on the phone, the guy that was interviewing me was like, so does I would tell you to like try going through a recruiting company or what? And I was kind of just confused because I was like, well, no, like they just,
I saw a job posting, I applied.
That I decided to go through the recruiting company and I didn't. That's just how I found the job. So that's how I started applying to the job. And then I'm like, well, wouldn't you know that your company is using the recruiting company to pull people in? Because he's like, usually people will just like, apply through like our own direct job listing or whatever. I was like, very confused at that point.
And I was like, I saw no job listing.
But yeah, I kind of just like after finding more out about the job and like also the location wasn't really like ideal, I decided to not continue with that one. And then the position that I ended up applying for is a SNF / long-term care. And that I did like 2, well, it was maybe like 1 phone screen or something with like their HR person, and she actually worked with the company so I could get like a little more information. And she was very pleasant. And then I did the actual like phone interview. And I thought it went pretty well and I was getting good vibes. And like basically at the end of the phone call, he kind of implied like, cause it was on a Friday, he was like, well, I love a Friday offer letter or something. So he kind of implied to me that like I would be getting the job. And later that day I did get an offer, and then I started 2 weeks later. So yeah.
Good stuff. For my job that I have right now, I had a phone interview with the HR person. I think that lasted about 45 minutes. And I was like, I got good vibes and stuff from that, obviously. I will say, like, when you're prepping for interviews of any kind, like, everyone says this, but do your research and your work beforehand.
I really, like, didn't have that many, like, behavioral type questions. Like, a lot of these were very just, like, they weren't super strict or crazy weird interviews. Like, I don't know.
I would say
I feel like I had prepped so much more for these interviews, like ready for whatever they were gonna ask me.
It's better to over prepare.
And then like they just like wouldn't ask that much. So
I think I did have like a couple behavioral interview questions where it would be like name a time, whatever. Mostly to do not like they were quizzing me on like my patient care. It wasn't that type of interview question. It was a lot more related to teamwork, interprofessional, like disciplinary healthcare and stuff. So it wasn't like you have a patient with the T or like a C6 spinal cord injury. Like, how would you treat them? Like, it was not like that. That would have stressed me out. But it was mostly like behavioral examples and stuff, or like times you had a challenging patient. Like, what did you do? Or like, how do you keep them motivated? Whatever. Stuff like that. That's honestly mostly general in a sense. But definitely like have scenarios tucked in the back of your mind. Like, don't have 10 scenarios for 10 different things. Have 3 scenarios that you can use for like 10 different things. Mm-hmm. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. And I like genuinely went through on like I have a Google Doc or something where I like kind of listed out my different clinical rotations that I had, and then I was like, okay, what's like a key experience that I can remember from a couple of these, and like what did that teach me or what did it show me?
If you remember like 1 or 2 or 3 situations like really well, then you can provide like more detail and probably like spin it a couple different ways versus like 10 small things that like really weren't super impactful.
I had one specific scenario that I thought of from my last rotation that I think I used like at 2 of the different interviews. because it was like I could spin it whatever way that they wanted it done. It was my that was my key like interdisciplinary healthcare like communication bit that I had prepped. So after that phone interview, I then got an email to get set up for an in-person interview, and so that was with HR, was my phone interview, and then my in-person interview was with the director of therapy and like the therapy manager, and so that one was like a 2-on-1. I was like, a little stressed, but it was honestly like still a pretty quick interview. I think it took probably like 20 minutes, and that was mostly because they had like a list of questions that I think they ask like all their new hires, because they were both like reading from a sheet of paper essentially, and so it was like a couple get to know you stuff, but then like a lot of other like behavioral type, like name an example when questions. And I will say, like, don't
I just hate interviews so much.
I hate them too.
I'm like getting stressed about it again.
I mean, it's like, oh my god, I have a job, why am I freaking out? I will say it was like overall pretty chill vibes, and as hard as it is, and like I say this as someone who like gets nervous for interviews and stuff, but like try and just like stay calm, cool, and collected. Remind yourself that you're all just people, and like just be yourself as best as you can. Like, be your best professional self. Because ultimately, like, if they hire you, you want to, like, get ingrained within that workplace and, like, just be part of the team. And so, like, being your most authentic self is, like, the best way that you can, recognize, or they can recognize if you're good for, like, their culture and their team. Yeah. Or if, like, you're a good fit for them, like, for yourself. This is also, like, just a little side note. This was on a day that there was, like, this huge, like, winter storm. Snowed. And I was like freaking out because I had to be there. I had to be there at like 8 a.m. or something for my interview. It was like
peak like snow during
the morning. And they're like, don't travel during the morning hours. Like, it's the riskiest time to travel right now. Like, wind advisory. I don't know what's going on. But I like literally got there like a half hour early because, and this place is not that far from where I live. But I was like, I'm leaving like 45 minutes early because what if it's like slow traffic? What if there's like snow and I can't see anything? What if I'm going 2 miles an hour? And it was fine. I got there and back in one piece. But yeah, that was a fun thing, like a stressful morning on top of like a stressful morning. It's a lot of fun. But then I kind of joked, I was saying, like, what do you think stressed me out more, the interview or the roads? The roads stressed me out more. So I got there and I was like, well, shoot, I can do anything now. Like, I just drove all the way here.
Yeah.
So I honestly feel like I was like less stressed than I potentially would have been otherwise, because I was like, I'm alive. That's what matters. So I don't know if that, calmed me down a little bit, but also pick out a good outfit that you feel like good and professional in. I thought my outfit was really cute that I wore to my interview.
I'm glad.
So
we can also kind of touch on a little bit like what our orientation process has been like once we
and then I got the offer for that job later that same day. So I was like, okay.
If they know, nice. They know.
I also don't know if literally anyone else applied to that position, so.
Well, it seems like you made it seem like they kind of like.
And they could be hiring more than one.
They might be hiring
person, so.
People.
If it was mostly like, if you don't suck, sure, you can be let in.
Yeah.
So I didn't suck.
So for my first day, basically the entire thing was like orientation, and they had like a different little health system that they used for documentation, so I had to like completely learn how to figure that out. And then they had like a lot of different like videos that I had to watch for orientation. It was just like a lot of that. Otherwise, like I was basically just like shadowing the PT whose position I was taking over, and kind of like seeing how she did things, seeing how she documented, and she was kind of just like running me through the ropes, I guess. Yeah, I think that I started because like that was like on Monday. On Tuesday, I think I started doing a couple treatments maybe like end of that week to see how I was doing. And then on that Friday, I had like 4 treatments, and I think that was like my full time, like the PT that I had been with like wasn't there. So I was like kind of on my own by the end of the week, but like I felt good and comfortable, and like I still wasn't on like a full caseload. Usually I probably have like 6 or 7 patients a day. So yeah, I'm figuring out some of this, like the system that they use. I'm slowly getting better and better, but like there's a couple things where I'm just like hitting myself in the head because I like make it harder for myself than it needs to be, or just whatever else. There's been a couple times where I've just been like, you're kidding me.
But what's like the biggest difference you've noticed, like between, obviously, like, you're definitely, like, kind of in charge of yourself now, but, like, that transition between student to, like, okay, you are the PT.
Or, here, before I answer your question, another thing that's new, that's, like, it's not really anyone's fault, but, like, you also have to recognize that, like, as a new grad, there's, like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, they have specific processes for, like, XYZ things that, like, they didn't maybe, like, explicitly say or cover on, like, my official, like, 2 or 3 orientation days. And then I find out about, you know, something that, like, they do later. Like, after evals, I found this out, like, this week. I'm supposed to, like, fill out a form of, like, how the, like, staff there is supposed to, like, transfer the patient, and I'm supposed to, like, give it to, like, 3 different people. And I wasn't ever told that explicitly, but I also, like, I didn't know to ask that because I don't know. So it's just, like, you don't know what you don't know, and you're gonna slowly probably figure things out, and yeah.
I think before we get into, like, answering my question, like, as a new grad or new hire in any position ever, I feel like you start your job and you're like, oh my god, like, I suck at this. That is the nature of starting literally any job, is, like, feeling like you don't know anything because you aren't familiar with the processes and procedures of that specific place, especially if you're a new grad. You, like, just are, you know, new at everything, being on your own and all that stuff. And so give yourself grace, because there'd be times, this is, like, before I'd be, like, chilling at home, Megan would come home and she'd, like, say, like, something that, like, went wrong potentially that day, and I'd be like, it's your second day, like, you are fine. You know, they expect this, like, every company that hires someone expects you to not be perfect when you first get hired. And so give yourself some grace with that stuff. But now to my question.
What was your question?
What do you think is the biggest differences you've noticed between, like, you know, you're a student and now you are the PT?
I would say biggest difference would probably be, I mean, you're obviously, like, you're kind of, like, by yourself. Like, I just went through, like, 8 months of, like, always being with, like, my CI or something, and, you know, having, like, some freedom, yes, but it's always, like, you're kind of, like, a team together. And I personally like being on my own, so I like having that separation a little bit where, like, it doesn't feel like there's, like, just someone on my shoulder or anything the whole day.
Sometimes it's just, like, the stressful part is not thinking about, like, am I doing this right or wrong? It's just, like, I don't like someone watching me doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't like to be perceived.
I will say, like, some things that have been, like, nice, because also I'm working at a place where, like, a lot of the patients have dementia, and going into that, I had some experience with patients who had dementia, but I didn't know how great I would be at, like, literally everyone having dementia, basically. And I have had, like, I've been complimented, like, a couple different times by, like, the PTA, and, like, how I handled, like, one situation, just, like, diffusing and redirecting when a patient was getting a little upset. And then, like, we had an eval at the end of this week where there was an LPN who was in the room kind of, like, helping me out if I needed it, and, like, the patient was just, you had to be very, like, repetitive, and he was getting kind of angry, but, like, not really, but, like, not following cues very well. But, like, the LPN, like, complimented me and, like, how I handled the situation, so,
like, that's so
it made me feel good, and, like, I'm doing okay in the
and it shows that you have, like, a knack for working with those kinds of patients, so maybe you're in the right place.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I can't really speak much to that because, like, I'm still doing orientation stuff, so, like, in a sense it does still kind of feel like I'm a student because I'm kind of, like, following a different PT that works there to, like,
but I think what's nice is, like, you said you've already, like, had specific inpatient experience. You kind of, like, are ready to go, so you were kind of saying that, you know, they were only having you, like, observe and shadow and, like, do what you're comfortable with, and you're kind of ready to, like,
because I'll get more into that. So I worked all 5 days this week. The first 3 days were general hospital orientation, which means that every, like, new hire hired within the past month at that hospital goes through the same orientation. So it's, like, nursing, CNAs, therapy, like, even I think there was, like, a dietitian there one day, like, or, like, a cook or something. We had different lengths of orientation, so I think the cook was only there, like, the first day, but we're all getting, like, the same information. So it's nothing super therapy specific. And then Thursday, Friday, since that general orientation was done, I was with the therapy department, and so I was with a specific PT, kind of, like, following her along, seeing documentation and stuff. And so, like, after the first day, I had done, like, all the observing stuff that day. I didn't do any documentation or anything. And then I was, like, thinking, okay, in my head I was like, all right, I guess, like, tomorrow there's an eval, like, I can do the eval, like, or if there's, like, a treatment, I can do something. But then, like, she's like, okay, so then tomorrow, like, maybe you document for these patients, and, like, I'll, like, still see them. And I was like, okay. I'm Like, it's just, I expected to honestly, like, be thrown in more. And I feel like that's in part because, like, so many of my CIs have thrown me in to, like, the wolves out of love.
They're like, yeah, sure.
You know what I mean, though? Like, out of love, they're like, all right, so you see this person? And I'm like, okay. And so it was just interesting because I was like, oh, I was expecting, like, you take the patients tomorrow. But I'm not complaining. But I am seeing patients on Monday when I go. And I feel like I'm going to kind of, like, push more for whatever I feel comfortable with seeing. So, and like you said, I have that inpatient rehab experience. I know another, like, new full-time hire. This is their first, like, rehab job, I think. And so they still, like, we're starting to see patients and stuff. But it's nice to have that background in my mind of, like, kind of knowing how the setting works at least a little bit. I've worked in one for 9 weeks, and that's what I've got.
Hey, it's more than some people. That was honestly kind of all I had outlined for this episode. So, unless you had anything else you wanted to chat about.
I mean, I'd love to chat, but that's all I had planned. I'll obviously keep you guys updated with me specifically if things change about me getting another job or anything. So yeah, but I did want, like, inpatient rehab is, like, kind of where I see myself, so I at least wanted to get a PRN position to get more experience, which is why, like, I feel like some people would be like, well, if you get another full-time job somewhere else, like, why bother with a PRN? So that was my thought process with that.
Plus the pros are, I mean, hopefully you get some good hours in and then maybe it's all worth it and it works out. But it's like, you know, you don't have set vacation days because you can just be like, I'm not working that day, you know?
I could.
So
I don't get any paid time off either, though. So
yeah, true. I feel like I just want to be, like, so picky with, like, the 10 vacation days that I do get that I'm gonna end up, like, going the whole year being like, I didn't even
use any vacation time.
It's just, like, hard to, like, plan out how do I want to use them, but I have a year to figure it out. So
anyways, we hope you guys enjoy this episode. Let us know if you are in, like, a new grad or changing career phase of your life, and or if you just remember, like, going through your hiring process for your current job. Let us know your trials and tribulations that you faced. Because it's, like, it's such, like, a not small time, because some people spend a long time, like, in the job hiring process, but, like, it's such an annoying phase of life that everyone has to go through, but
everyone wishes they were in it.
Yeah, it's the worst. So just wanted to shed some light on that and share with them the experience that everyone has. And with
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch the video version. We're trying to get 2,000 subscribers there.
And you can also follow us on Instagram at According To. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast.
And we will talk to you guys next Thursday.
Bye.